Hello and welcome to Stress Less with me, Jess. Today, my special guest is Louise Marino. Hello, Louise. How are you
Hi,
today?
how are you, Jessica? Thanks so much for the invitation. Happy to be here with you.
I'm so excited. I forget when we met. We met a couple months ago, and you reached out to me and said, "Hey, we do a lot of the similar work. Let's get on a phone call." We really had a great conversation. So I'm so glad that it ended up to you coming onto the podcast.
Absolutely. Thanks. Very appreciative.
Of course, of course. So let's get into it. Who you are. For over 18 years, you've been in the Fortune 500 companies. You leverage experience in human-centered leadership and emotional intelligence and collaborates with other experts around the world to help foster workplace cultures, communities that are healthier and happier.
Yes.
Yes. But I always ask, what's the mission? And I think your mission is probably the best mission I've ever heard. I said, what's your business mission? And you say, I train leaders to be more human. Can we
Yes.
just start there? Can you tell me all about that? Because that I think resonates with so many of us. Can you give me a little bit more of that?
Yeah, sure. I think people have the general understanding that there are always changes, but what we need to understand is that in the past, 2 to 3 years, there have been changes that are not normal changes, but that are drastic changes that are really transforming the workplace. And one of the implications of that is the changes in leadership, right? So as the new employees are coming into the workplace, the new generation, their expectations that they have of their leaders is completely different from what kind of our parents and ourselves grew up with. So it's very important to understand, for folks that have been leaders in the past. I always say, once a great leader, not always a great leader, because you may have been a great leader in the past, maybe managing earlier workforce in the 80s or 90s, early 2000s. But if you're leading people today, you really have to be aware of the major shifts and changes. And I think one of those is that people want to be in workplaces that are more human. And what that means is that where there is a more of a personal connection. And it was the way that leaders were trained in the past. They were not trained to connect in a more personal way. So some leaders that were successful in the past really struggle to connect, with new employees. And I have more details that I can share later, but obviously I don't want to make my segment too long.
Isn't that the best? That's my favorite part about my podcast. Always getting people so excited about their mission and getting them excited about talking about what they do. And so, because wherever if you're listening, you're not seeing it, you can always hear the people's excitement. And so I love hearing that. It's my favorite part, but you could totally hear, okay, I'm up. This is what we do. This is my mission. So I love that she brought all of that. But like you said, you could have been a great leader in the 80s and the 90s, but things are changing. So, how are you growing with that? And I 100% agree. A lot of us are looking for that more human connection. I don't want to just go to work, click, and go home. I do in some sense, but not, I still want to feel as a human, not as a computer system, just saying, here are the numbers, get these numbers done,
Yeah.
figure it out, you know?
Yeah. In fact, so there, going back to continuing on the theme of major changes, one of the changes is like the attitude towards work. So, if you go back to like 80s, 90s, early 2000, it was almost like this understanding that, I have an obligation to work, and work is, I don't like my job. Work is really not fun, but it's something that I have to do. So if I have a family and I need to provide to my family, it doesn't matter if my job is really miserable. I may have, I come home and like I totally hate my job. And even in the words of a lot of employees in employee surveys, they feel that way. Like, I really hate my job. In fact, more than half of Americans, would quit their job today if they had another opportunity. So, or thinking about leaving their jobs. But they, maybe they hated their job, but they felt, well, it doesn't matter that I hate my job. It is my obligation to be in this job. This is like a price to pay, right? I have to be in this job because I have a family. I need to pay, my bills and my responsibilities. But one of the changes today, with the internet and the access to information, as you're looking at social media and you're, connecting with other people in the world and, benchmarking and comparing what are other people doing, there's new sense of really life is not about, life is short. And I shouldn't live a life that is miserable and that sucks. It's like, okay, if I don't like my job, then why would I continue for the rest of my life doing a job that I don't enjoy? And in fact, from a retirement standpoint, in the past, like a lot of people were trained with this idea of, hey, you need to pay your duties, pay your price for until you're 65. And then when you turn 65, then you can consider retiring, and then you can have fun, then you can have a life, then you can have well-being. And then, but 65, it's a, and I don't mean to be offensive from an age standpoint, but there are a lot of things at age 65 that you may, it may be too late, right? So it's like the new generation. It's like, I'm not going to wait until 65. I want, so some people waited to be 65 to start traveling, right? It's like folks now in their 20s, it's like, I want to travel around the world. I want to have a job. Like if I can work remotely, I want to be working for Hawaii, from Hawaii. And why not? I mean, why do I need to be here in the office if my presence physically doesn't make any difference? I want to work 1 week from Puerto Rico. I want to work 1 way from Rome. And for the folks kind of from previous generation, that seemed like a crazy idea. How are you going to be able to do that and the price and this and that? But with access to information through the internet, in platforms, so if you're traveling a lot, you have miles, you have platforms that give you discounted tickets. If you're single, maybe you are okay and flexible to stay at a place that is not a fancy hotel. So it ends up being that the way that the life that they live, if they spend a week somewhere like in the Bahamas or something, it doesn't really cost them that much more, because what they're spending is about the same that they're spending at home in terms of like food and all that. And it's like, okay, this is a new way I want to live. I want to do a job that I enjoy. So I'm no longer going to put up with a job that I don't enjoy. I want to do work that is fulfilling to me, that I have a mission and a purpose and that I enjoy. And I want to be, happy at my place, and I want to have a better connection. I want to work with friends, basically. I want to work with people that I like and that I enjoy being around. That's another difference, that in the past people were okay with working with other people that they thought were not good people that make them feel bad, people that they didn't want to be, close to, but they said, I have to, take one for the team, right? People have less tolerance to that now, and I think it's a good thing.
I love it. You hit on so much. And I think even when I first started, I was like, all right, let's try to make this 30 minutes, but we could talk about this for hours. And I think I remember that too, when we first connected, that we have so much to talk about, because everything you're mentioning is very important, and it's becoming more known, right? That people want to travel, people want to find that work-life balance, and they don't want to just work to work. They want to work to live, right? They want to work to have a life. And what does that look like? And how do you even get that, right? And so maybe it's not even so much traveling and working from Hawaii and Puerto Rico, which is amazing, but it's just, how do I find that so that I'm not just working to work, but I'm working to have a life and, but still have a family? How do I find all that? Yeah. So, okay, so let's get into it. Tell us about what you do, because you're a speaker, you're a writer. I mean, you do it all. So tell us what you specifically do and how you're helping these leaders.
Sure. So, I conduct training on human-centered leadership and emotional intelligence. So I've dedicated, for the past, I would say around 10 years, I've been studying, human-centered leadership and emotional intelligence. I've been writing articles that have been published, in multiple publications. And then, people started to contact me and say, I want to discuss your article with you. I mean, professors at universities started to say, hey, we're talking about this in class, can you come and talk to it? So from there, I just started to do training, so I participate in conferences, in events where I would speak, and then I come in, both for, two organizations to train their leaders to be more human through learning more about human-centered leadership and emotional intelligence. And then I also do some coaching, so for leaders, up and coming leaders that want to hear some perspective. So a lot of what I do is just, I'll share. So when I work with organizations, some of them may give me information about, if they have done employee surveys about, sentiment, where they're just kind of checking in on attitudes, how their employees are feeling. And, so I'll take all that input and I'll combine it with, other data, research that I've done, myself. And then I can provide, a lot of times what I'll do is like, I'll provide forums and kind of like a platform, a discussion where I can facilitate these type of conversations. And it usually, for the more modern and open-minded organizations, is about just kind of letting it out. It's like, okay, let's let our employees, tell us how they are feeling, what they're thinking. Let's engage in this conversation. And a lot of times, expert like myself, and there are, multiple experts around the world that can definitely, facilitate this type of conversations in a productive way. Sometimes organizations organizations are afraid because it's like, wow, I want to be careful. You want to open a can of worms, or you don't want to put us in an uncomfortable situation. But I think it's a new day, and I think people are more, people prefer to talk about these things. It's just like there's an elephant in the room. Well, you might as well, the leadership of the past was about avoiding. It's like, okay, if there's something that we know it's going on, just kind of step back, wait until the storm passes, and then you reemerge after, the storm has passed. I think those days are over. I think it's more now, a lot of surveys and research will tell you that people prefer to basically address and, say, hey, here, Jessica, we're going through this situation. Why don't we, talk about it? And I think through emotional intelligence, the understanding of your own emotions and how you manage your emotions, you can be trained to engage in difficult conversations with, and then, just kind of managing your emotion, which a lot of times get in the way. And one of the obstacles to being able to engage in difficult conversations is emotion, right? Sometimes you can take something personal and, that just kind of gets in the way. So with emotional intelligence, more about, hey, understanding, who you are, what you feel, what are the triggers, what are things that, and then, from even from a self-awareness standpoint is to understand, okay, what are my opportunities, where, how am I coming across, how am I making others feel? And then, don't take things personal. And then the use of empathy, for example, to try to understand the logic of other people, why other people are thinking about something in a way that is different than the way you're thinking about it, and try to consider that notion and actually, give a chance to that other logic, because in many cases, you can actually change your mind by trying to follow the logic of a thought that is different than yours. And from a emotional maturity, one of the things that he said is that the people with the highest emotional intelligence are able to understand a thought that they don't agree with, right? So I disagree with what you think, but I can understand the logic of your thinking. So that's high level emotional intelligence, but we can all get there.
I love it. So my next question for you is, if someone's listening, they're a business owner and they're saying, oh, I want Luis at my office. I want him to support my employees. I want him to support me. What is the best way they can get in contact with you?
So the easiest way, one way in which most people contact me is through LinkedIn. So if you are on LinkedIn, go ahead and you can send me an invitation. Just Luis Moreno. I'm here in Minnesota. So, or if you go to Google, you write Luis Moreno Emotional Intelligence, and you'll find different websites. But I have a website is www.luismoreno, and then in the same word, the initials T as in Tom, C as in Charlie, B as in boy, P as in Peter, and N as in Nancy, which stands for Twin Cities Business Peer Network, which is an organization that I'm associated with. So, you can go there and there's all of my contact information, but I'm on LinkedIn, Instagram, YouTube, all the Twitter, all the social media platforms out there.
There's so many out there, isn't there? And I'll have all the, wherever you're listening to this at, all of that would be repeated in the notes. I just always like to make it a point where exactly, usually the best, because like you said, there's so many out there. And granted, we're all on all of them, but what's the best one specifically for you? So exciting. If there was a business owner, he's listening, and there was one piece of advice that he could take from this episode, what would that be?
In emotional intelligence, one of the biggest lessons that I tell about people is it's not about you, and it's not about you. It's actually, it sounds like an easy phrase, but it's a very complex. There's a lot behind it. But we, in the way that we are raised and how we're trained, and when we come into a lot of times competitive corporate environments, we are trying to focus on ourselves, right? So if you are coming into a large organization, Fortune 500, and you ask, what you can do to be successful, people will tell you, more senior leaders, many of them will tell you, focus on yourself, and focus on yourself. So self-focus is like everything. The question is self-focus good or bad, right? And if you think it's good, or if you think it's bad, both are right, because it is both good and bad, because it's all about balance, like everything in life, right? It's all in moderation. So if you don't have self-focus, it's very hard to do well in your business as a leader, managing a new company, anything that you're doing. If you don't have self-focus, you're not going to succeed. So as you increase your self-focus, you're going to perform better, until you get to what is called the area of the optimal level of self focus, where you are where you have a good balance between focusing on yourself and focusing on all things. So the decisions that you make are more holistic. You're considering all the important factors, but there is such thing as going past the optimal level of self focus, where you can then be too focused on yourself. And when you are too focused on yourself, from a leadership standpoint, actually leaders that are too focused on themselves have a lower liking score. So like people don't want to work for leaders that are, you know, so focused on themselves. Sometimes they can fall into the risk of being narcissistic, right? And there are many of them out there. And also as a business owner, right, when you're making decisions solely based on your own interest, some of those decisions can, for example, make money in the short term, and so you can make, you know, some quick money, but then it may not necessarily be in the interest of, you know, the entire organization, your employees, you know, the company, the community. And then there are instances when those decisions, even though can make you money in the short term, can result in higher costs for you later down the road. For example, the cost of reputation. You know, there are you know, I work in crisis communication and, you know, reputation management as well. And then when you're out there in the media and something, you know, gets out there that is a scandal for your company, it can cost, you know, it costs a lot. In some cases, it can actually result in you know, it can affect the life of that organization, especially, you know, if you're a nonprofit and you are receiving funds, you know, say, for example, from the government, sometimes those scandals can really get in the way for you to be able to have funding for your organization. So what I would say is, you know, tip number one in emotional intelligence is not about you. So in all of the, you know, you have to learn to take your own universe. You know, by default, the most important thing for us is our own, ourself, our own life, our own universe. And every time somebody's talking to us, whatever they say to us will, you know, change it so that we are the protagonist. We're always going to put ourselves in the center of the story, but there are techniques, and I'll be happy to teach you, you know, those techniques where you can actually put yourself on pause for a second so that you can then really concentrate in the you know, in the need and the matters of others, so you can get interested in somebody else's something, right? So as a business owner, I would say number one is not about you, it's about, you know, the entire context of things. It's about the community, it's about your employees, it's about your company, and then it's also about you, but it's not only about you, it's not all about you.
So we were talking about, you know, how important this emotional intelligence is in the workplace, right? And how you brought it down to a non-woo-woo standpoint, because I think it gets such a bad rep of, oh, it's this higher power, and, you know, it's, you know, we have to pray or we have to meditate, and granted, all those things are amazing, and I'm not discounting them at all, but I think people overlook the importance of emotional intelligence and what it really brings to the workplace.
Yeah, no, thank you for bringing that up. You actually bring a very important point. So there, you know, the parents of emotional intelligence back, you know, 2-3 decades ago, they really had a hard time, you know, as they were out and pioneering this field, because for some people thought that this was more kind of something esoteric out there that was very abstract, and they didn't think that it was, you know, like scientifically something that was, you know, true. And then you know, all of the research by them and prestigious organizations around the world made it where, you know, more and more people are really believing and supporting and promoting and, you know, adapting and leveraging these fields. For example, in my own situation, I only started about, you know, within the past 10 years, and I even myself encounter some challenges, you know, as I was going out and talking to folks. I would receive you know, comments about that, you know, like I would publish an article and somebody would say, oh yeah, that's very easy to say to you know, to students in your classroom, but wait until you work in a company. It's like, no, I am an employee in a company. I don't teach at, you know, I didn't teach at the time, I teach now. But you know, so for example, now, you know, there are more and more organizations. In fact, you know, an actual, for people that like facts and data, if one of the things that have been, you know, people are monitoring is in job descriptions, you know, when organizations are now looking for leaders, you will see that there has been a shift in the job description in terms of the requirements for a leader. So in the past, a lot of the requirements had to do with technical knowledge, is how much the person knew about a topic. You know, if you were hiring somebody in finance, it makes sense that the person had to have, you know, certain knowledge of certain topics so that they can go and lead the finances of a company. But you will see now in the new, if you're looking for senior, talent, senior manager for senior leadership roles, that in the job description, there are a lot of, I'm seeing now where people say high levels of emotional intelligence, call out that way, but in some cases it may not say emotional intelligence, but they'll talk about the components of it. So for example, it's very common to see positive interpersonal social skills, which is one of the components of emotional intelligence. You see higher levels of empathy, good levels of self-awareness, and so and sometimes the HR person may not even know that they're talking about emotional intelligence, but those are the components of emotion. When you say self-motivation, that is one of the components of emotional intelligence. So basically, organizations are more and more looking for leaders that have higher levels of emotional intelligence. And it makes sense because, when you look at the Great Resignation, right? When you look at the data in terms of like how much, the low levels of engagement, employee engagement that we're seeing out there, when we do, we look at the data and we talk to the employees, one of the things that is affecting, there are many things affecting them, but one of them is their relationship with their leaders, right? It's like they don't want to live a stressful life. I mean, employees don't feel like, hey, life is short, there's a coronavirus, people are dying. I had a relative or a friend that was very sick or passed away. It's like, hey, my life is very precious. It's valuable. I want to have a good life, and I don't want to be in an environment where I have a leader that is making my life miserable by intimidating me, putting pressure that is unnecessary, asking for deadlines, not giving me opportunities, not believing me, not trusting in me, not giving me the person is not excited about anything else that is not their own life. So then that the lack of connection from a personal standpoint, which affects their employee satisfaction, turns out into low engagement and high turnover, and that has a very high cost for organizations. Organizations now know that you may have leaders that know a lot and have a very high technical knowledge, but if they can't connect with people, they're not going to be able to engage the new generation of employees that are looking for something different than what our parents and even myself back, when I started in the workplace and my peers were looking for.
Oh, wow. You said so many good in the sense of in the beginning where people were so closed mind to it in the beginning. Like, oh yeah, bring this to the workplace, right? That good luck having that fun, right? This isn't real. This kind of mindset isn't real. And I know, like you said in the beginning, is that more people are becoming more open to it, right? Which is amazing, but we still have a lot of work to do, right? Because I think, and when I was actually teaching the other day, and tell me if you hear this too, when I was teaching a group, they were saying a lot of what we say isn't oh, I didn't know that. Like we know a lot of these facts that you and I are spitting out, right? But it's remembering, right? It's keeping them in the forefront is where this kind of the struggle can be. Do you agree?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you actually, what you're saying is very important. That is make me think of an important point that I want to bring up here in your podcast is that think about, so when we're thinking about emotional intelligence, how we're connecting with others, how we're treating others, how we're helping to engage others and helping with the workplace. If you're thinking in the context of leadership, one of the things that I go out with an important message, and I want people to understand is that in many cases, people think of great leadership as the equivalent of, think of like when you go to the university and you obtain a degree, right? If I graduate as a, for whatever, I have a bachelor's degree in XYZ, or if I have a master's degree in business, when I obtain that degree, is with me for the rest of my life, because that's something that I obtain. And once I have that degree, I'm going to be a bachelor's in business administration for the rest of my life until I die. So they think in the same way about leadership, right? Once I become a great leader, then that's like a degree that I got, and then I am already a great leader, and I'm going to be a great leader forever, right? But what I encourage people to think about, great leadership is more like what is easier for people to think about in terms of like remembering, like you were saying, is a language. Like you would ask somebody, hey, Jessica, do you speak Italian? So, oh, when I was going to, or do you speak Spanish, for example? This actually happens all the time. Do you speak Spanish? So, oh, you know what? When I was going through school, I took Spanish, and I used to, I was able to have conversations in Spanish and stuff, but I haven't practiced it. I haven't practiced it in a long time, so I've forgotten, right? I can't speak anymore, right? So people really understand the idea of a language as being something that you can only do and do well if you're in continuous practice of it. But they don't think of, oh, I learned Spanish, I learned Italian, and I'm going to be able to speak Italian for the rest of my life. So leadership is the same. Leadership is like a language. Great leadership is like a language, right? So that if you are actively doing and you're practicing, you're going to do it well. But if you stop doing it, if you start practicing, you're going to stop doing it well. So one of the messages that I have for leaders is leadership is like a sport. You need to be training for it. You have to have, the training, the development, the monitoring, the coaching, and you have to have the willingness and the intention, the self-motivation to want to be a great leader, right? And that is very important. But the other part that is important as well is that in the past, organizations will hire people that they believe to be great leaders, right? So you do a great hiring process. You hire somebody that you in your assessment says that is a great leader, and you bring them in, and then you leave it to the leader to continue to be a great leader. And you basically, as an organization, you step back and you say, hey, we hire you to be a great leader, we'll pay you to be a great leader, and we, good luck, be a great leader. But what the research now is saying is that actually the employees don't, when you work in a company and you have a bad leader, you don't think of the fault is of the bad leader. You think that part of the responsibility is of the organization. If I have a bad boss, people say, oh, people don't leave companies, they leave bosses. Well, that's really not true, because they do leave companies. They leave the companies that tolerate, bad leaders. And because a bad leader is not only the fault of a bad leader, is also in a way the fault of the organization, because, you have to hire great leaders, but you have to have the monitoring, the planning and budgeting for, training and development for those leaders to, stay up, keep up with time, to have the data, the trends, all of the research and the practice. And, all of that has to be provided by the organization with the self-interest of a leader to wanting to be a great leader. So the combination of both is what ends up in being great leadership that sustains in time.
Oh my goodness. I love the example of the language, because I always use the example of working out, things like that. But the language part, I think, really registrates with a lot of people, because how many of us have taken a language in grade school or high school and then we don't use it? And guess what, right? So it's exactly like any other degree or anything else that we're trying to do in our life, that if you don't continue to use it, you're going to lose it, right?
Exactly.
So, oh my goodness, so many good nuggets. Louis, seriously, you're amazing. I'm just so excited that you reached out and connected with me, took that chance, and now you're on my podcast. I'm so excited.
Thanks for the invitation. Thanks for all the work you do to help people to feel, to have better lives and to have less stress. That's so important. It's a pleasure to be here with you. I look forward to continuing to collaborate and to do work together.
Yeah.